Hello, social psychology students. So the purpose of this video is to talk about the chapter on the self. I believe it's chapter 4 in the textbook, and it will be included on the first exam. So to begin with, it's sort of like a vocabulary lesson. We need to make sure that you understand the difference between the self-concept, self-esteem, and self-efficacy. And these will play a role in social comparison theory and in self-presentation tactics and the personal social identity continuum. So it kind of all goes together. So let's begin with talking about the self-concept. So what I'd like you to do is take out a sheet of paper and put down the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way down to 10. And if you've got lined paper, you can use the lined paper. If you're using a white sheet of paper, just put a blank line next to each number. Then on the top of the page, I want you to put I am, and then fill in those 10 blanks. I am, okay, fill it in. You can stop the video now and do that. Okay, assuming you're back from the video, you've filled in the 10 things that you think you most are. That's your self-concept. It's one of the best measures we have of self-concept. We ask people what they are. Now, what tends to be in your self-concept? One of the pieces of information that tends to be in there are things that made you unique when you were growing up in your family of origin. So, for example, in my family, I'm one of 6 kids, but 5 of us are females, and my brother is the only boy in the family. So my brother's self-concept, now as an adult, probably one of those 10 blanks, he'd say, I'm a man. Because for him, being a male was very unique. Only he and my dad, out of the 8 of us, were men. So that was one of the things that made him unique and interesting and different. So it became part of his self-concept. Probably in my 10 blanks, I am a woman is not going to be there, because being a female was ordinary. 6 of the 8 of us were. It wasn't something that you could hang your hat on. So it doesn't become part of my self-concept. Does that kind of make sense? Other things that are usually part of your self-concept involves the roles that you play. So you might have in there, I am a mom, or I am a Cameron student, or I'm part of the Cameron community, different roles that you play. So your self-concept is who it is that you think you are. When you look at that sheet, it's probably interesting to look at it on the 10 things that you think most define who you are, okay? Self-esteem is how happy you are with the concept that you have, how happy you are with the you that you think you are. And so some of us will have high self-esteem, medium self-esteem, low self-esteem. You can be somewhere on this continuum. And usually when we talk about self-esteem, we're talking about global self-esteem. So it's like, overall, how good do you think you are? How happy are you with the you that you think you are? Okay? And in an ideal world, everyone has medium self-esteem. I know that may surprise you, but the research shows that people with low self-esteem tend not to have very good life circumstances. They'll tend to be involved in relationships that are abusive. They're underemployed. They'll have jobs where they don't get paid very much and aren't really challenged. They're not happy people. But similarly, people with very high self-esteem don't have good outcomes either. They get really upset when promotions come up and they're not promoted. So they're actually more likely to be arrested for white-collar crimes. It's sort of like, since they didn't give me that promotion, I'm going to steal from the company because they should be paying me more than I'm getting. They're much more likely to get divorced. After all, they're so amazing. There's lots of people that would love to marry them. And if this person isn't doing enough for them, then they're out of there to go on to the next person. So they tend to be very frustrated, thinking that the world is not really appreciating how wonderful they are. The people who tend to have the best outcomes are those that have moderate self-esteem. So they feel like they're good and valuable and have a lot to offer the world, but that they're not, God's gift to the world and expecting to always be promoted and to be that everyone will see them as the best at everything. So that's our self-esteem. Self-efficacy is how good we think we are at a particular task, skill, ability, opinion, something like that. So it's not global, it's very specific. So you'll have self-efficacy for how good of a test taker you are. If your self-efficacy is high, you think you're a really good test taker, then probably this next exam that we're about to have, and that will open on Monday, September 21st at noon, and then close the following Sunday, 11:59 p.m. On that exam, if you have high self-efficacy that you're a good test taker, then you're probably looking forward to that test. You're like, let me show what I know. I'm going to study hard and do well. If you have low self-efficacy in test taking, then you're probably really nervous about the exam. And self-efficacy plays a huge role in our behavior. And so there's a very famous study done where they introduce people to a new task. And it's something like a toss ring task, but they manipulate it. So when people first do the task, half of them are randomly assigned to the condition where they do really well. And they're told, wow, you are fantastic. You do so much better than most people. You're like in the top 10%. Then they randomly assign other people to tell them how horrible they are at this task. They're in the bottom 10%. Most people do much better than they. Then, after giving them that feedback, then they're told, we're going to do the task again, but this time you get to decide where you want to put the pole that you're then going to throw the rings on, okay? And they look to see the extent to which these people challenge themselves. And what they found was people who had high self-efficacy were led to believe they were really good at this. They tended to put the pole at a nice, challenging distance where they'd have to work hard to get it. It wouldn't be easy, but that most of the time, or at least half the time, they would be able to get it. And usually when we appropriately challenge ourselves with tasks, we grow and develop. So these people with high self-efficacy put the task at a nice, challenging place where they're going to grow and develop and get better. However, those who were given the false feedback to believe that they were horrible at the task, most of them chose to put the pole very close to them, making it really easy to do the task so they do really well at it. A few of them took the strategy where they put the pole so far away that they basically miss it every time and fail. In other words, people with low self-efficacy tend to set up the situation where where it's so easy that they'll always pass, or so difficult that they're basically not even trying. And that prevents them from growing and developing and becoming someone who would be good at this task. So low self-efficacy is really difficult. We want to do everything we can not to have low self-efficacy, to keep a growth mindset where, okay, I'm not good at this right now, but if I try hard or if I practice more, this is something I'll get good at. Okay, so that's self-concept, self-esteem, and self-efficacy. So hopefully you understand the definitions of those three. The next thing I want to talk about are self-presentation tactics. So usually when we meet people, we want to present ourselves in a positive light. After all, we want the people to like us. So we're going to present ourselves as positively as we can. But we also, at the same time, want to present ourselves the way we see ourselves. We want the other person to verify that the concept of who we are, they think we are that way also. So it's called self-verification. So we have this drive to let other people see us the way we see us, because that verifies the information that we have. At the same time, we have the drive for the person to see us positively. So if you have high self-esteem or moderate self-esteem, these things probably work out well for you. You're going to present yourself the way you see yourself, and it's probably going to be positive enough where the other person is going to be attracted to you and want to hang out with you or get to know you better. And so it works out really well. People who have low self-esteem, though, have a hard time with this because their drive to be seen positively and their drive for self-verification conflict. And so they have a rough time of it. So self-presentation tactics are the tactics that you use so that the other person that you're communicating with will see you the way you see you, and also at the same time see you positively. Okay. The next thing that I want to talk about is the personal social identity continuum. And I'm going to hold up a piece of paper here. So at any time, at any point in time, we could see ourselves on a continuum, from seeing ourselves as an individual person, a unique human being, different from all other human beings, all the way to belonging to a particular social group, in this case, a Cameron University community member. So where on this continuum am I falling? Do I see myself as Mary Teresa Francis DeZindalet, a unique human being different from all others? Or am I seeing myself right now as part of the Cameron University community? Well, right now I'm wearing black and gold Cameron colors. I'm sitting in a Cameron office, looking at a Cameron computer, doing a lecture about social psychology. On this continuum, all the cues around me are pushing me to see myself as part of a Cameron University community member. So probably right now, I'm probably somewhere over here on this continuum, okay? But at any given point in time, there's not just one social identity continuum that we're on. So right now, also, I could be on this seeing me, Mary Teresa Francis, DeZindalet as a unique individual, or as being part of the social identity continuum of being a female. Where am I on this continuum? Or you could look at I'm a mom, somewhere on that, where on this continuum am I? On the personal, Mary Teresa Francis DeZindalet, to the social identity of being a mother. And you can see that we've got all these different identities, all these different social identities. Most of us see it almost like a bicycle wheel with all the different spokes. And each of these spokes is a different social identity that we have. Which spoke you're on and where you are on the spoke is determined based on the cues around you. So right now, like I said, I'm probably going to be pretty far in the psychology major, psychology spoke, or the Cameron University spoke, because I've got all these Cameron cues around me and all these cues around me talking about social psychology. So that's the personal social identity continuum. And one thing that you can do if you want someone to feel that have their identity be part of their social identity, then you use cues like Cameron University sweatshirts will do that. Cameron colors will do that. Teach students the Aggie sign. Those are things that then make us more likely to see ourselves as part of, to be on that social identity side as part of the Cameron University community. So it ends up being important. Right, the next thing I want to talk about is social comparison theory. Okay, so social comparison theory is this theory that says that we compare ourselves to other people. I'm sure you're not shocked by this, okay? Some of the time we compare ourselves to people who are better than we are. Other times we compare ourselves to people who are worse than we are. When we compare ourselves to people who are better than we are, we call this upward social comparison. When we compare ourselves with people who are worse than we are, we call that downward social comparison. Exactly. It turns out that for tasks, abilities, we do much better if we practice upward social comparison. So next week, after you take that first exam, let's say you get a B or C on it and you really want to have an A in the class. It would be best for you to find a student who got an A on the exam and ask to study with them. You're going to find someone who's slightly better than you, and then you're going to study with them, practice them. You're going to, that upward social comparison will challenge you to improve, and you're more likely to get better. For everything else though, if it's not like, learn jogging quickly or bicycling fast, it's not a task or an ability. For everything else, downward social comparison is much better for us. So, for example, there's one study that was done where they looked at women who just learned that they were diagnosed with breast cancer. Those that compared themselves with people who had it worse, who said, okay, well, I've got breast cancer, at least it's not, cancer of the lymph nodes or liver cancer or cancer somewhere else in their body. Those women lived longer. That's how powerful it was. Were more likely to recover from the breast cancer, less pain when they were undergoing the treatments, all kinds of positive things, than those that compared themselves with people that did not have breast cancer. So downward social comparison is what really helps us for overall happiness and for getting over things. It's one reason why group therapy may be effective. So one of my parents' friends was in a terrible car wreck, and the woman was driving and her husband was next to her, and he was injured very critically and was in a wheelchair for quite some time, and she was taking care of him. And of course, she had a lot of guilt and felt really badly. So how do you handle how horrible this event is? Well, she joined a support group for other people that had serious injuries in car wrecks. And it was amazing how great it was for her. You could tell how much better she seemed in no time at all. And one of the reasons was she would talk about, well, there was one person in the group who he was driving, and one of his kids in the back seat got killed in the car wreck. So she goes, I think it's so bad because my husband's in a wheelchair right now over, a red light I went through, but his daughter died. And so that downward social comparison really helped her to get better and improve and come to terms with what had happened and forgive herself and move on. And she didn't intentionally go through the red light. So social comparison theory really is important to our functioning. There's some other parts, or there's another part of the theory that I find interesting and want to tell you about, and that has to do with how social comparison can affect our self-esteem. So it turns out that when we compare ourselves to people who are better than us, we'll have a slight dip in self-esteem. So let's say I find out, you get your exam back and you find out that a lot of people got A's and you got a B. Well, you're probably gonna have a slight dip in your self-esteem as a test taker. You're gonna didn't do as well in that test as I thought I would, and I studied really hard, and wow, a lot of people did better than me. So you do that upward social comparison, didn't fare well, so you have a dip in self-esteem. Now, if that person is a close friend of yours, the dip in self-esteem is likely to even be stronger, assuming that both of you really want to do well in psychology or in social psychology. If it's important to you to do well in social psychology, important to your friend too, and you studied together and that person did better, then your dip in self-esteem is even going to be more severe than if it was just a stranger. But here's where it flips. When our friends are really, someone we're close to, is really good at something that we know we're not good at, that we're okay not being good at. It's not part of our self-concept that we want to be good at that. So in my example, it's singing. I took voice lessons when I was in college, and I want to be able to sing in church without sounding ridiculous. And after 3 years of the lessons, I thoroughly enjoyed them. Well, let's just put it, every semester you had to sing at a recital. And for most of those semesters, I got the most improved student. Everyone was here and here was me, but I was the most improved. So it wasn't going well. Although I really did enjoy it and kept doing it. At the end, when I hugged her goodbye and said, oh, I'm going off to graduate school and I think I'm going to continue this, she whispered in my ear that I should save my money. So So I came to terms with it. I'm not good at singing. It's none of my wheelhouse. I married someone who's really good at singing, and my son is phenomenal. So, but I'm not good at it, and I'm okay with not being good at it. For things like that, when you have a friend is good. So one of my friends is so good that her master's degree is in opera, and she's actually sung with the Philadelphia Opera, with the opera in Hansel and Gretel. Well, look at how proud I am as I tell you that. What happens is when our friends do really outstanding things, things that we know we're not good at, and our self-esteem is fine not being good at that, we actually get an increase in our self-esteem by having our friends do so well. We call it basking in the glory of another. So if your sister or brother or parents or good friend or husband or wife or does something, or kid does something really outstanding, something where you're not competing with them, you actually will get an increase in self-esteem, even though you had nothing to do with it. So it's kind of interesting how social comparison theory works. Okay, another thing that I want to talk about is self-perception theory. And this is a theory that was created by Ben. And it becomes really important in the next exam when we start talking about cognitive dissonance theory. But when I used to include it with the second exam, it was almost too much. So it also can be talked about here as part of the self chapter. After all, it's self-perception theory. And according to Ben says that we come to know our attitudes, emotions, opinions by watching our behavior, just like I come to know someone else's feelings, opinions, thoughts by watching their behavior. Now think about that. Is that how it feels to you? It's not how it feels to me. It feels to me like I have inside access to my thoughts and feelings, and that's what drives my behavior. But Ben says, no, that's not true. Ben says that if I want to know how I think about something or feel about something, I'm going to look at my behavior. And from looking at my behavior, I'll know how I think or feel. Now, even though this is counterintuitive, I don't need you to agree with it, but I do need you to understand it. And it can be used in therapy. There is a therapy out there where when a couple comes, I'm just going to pick on the guy. Let's say a couple comes and they're saying they're having problems, and the man says, I just am not in love with her anymore. I remember being in love with her, but the feeling's gone. You know what that song, the feeling's gone, I can't take it, can't bring it back. The therapist might say, let's try this. What did you used to do when you were madly in love with her? What was your behavior like? Maybe you brought her chocolates. Maybe you called her several times a day. Maybe you brought her flowers. Maybe you complimented her. For the next month, I want you to do the behaviors that you used to do when you were in love with her. So I want you to bring her chocolates, call her several times a day, bring her flowers, and compliment her. And people do this for a month. And sometimes when they come back, the men are like, wow, the feeling's back again. I'm in love again. Well, from self-perception theory, Ben's self-perception theory, that would make perfect sense. We look at our behavior to know what we're thinking and feeling, just like we look at someone else's behavior to know what they're thinking and feeling. All right, what I'd like to do now is do a share screen so that we're looking at the PowerPoint slides for the self. So we've talked about self-efficacy, we've talked about the personal social identity continuum, we've talked about social comparison theory and self-perception theory. The last thing I want to talk about in this video is Wickland's theory of objective self-awareness. And Wickland said that when we think of ourselves objectively, when we become objectively self-aware, and we can think of ourselves objectively when we see ourselves the way other people see us. So in the laboratory, the way that you make this happen is by having someone look at a video of themselves. Have them look at a video of themselves. Have them listen to their voice on an audio recorder. Have them look into a mirror. All of those things will allow the person to see themselves the way other people see them and allow themselves to become objectively self-aware. And what Wicklund said is that when we become objectively self-aware, three things come to mind. Our actual self, who it is that we are right now. Our ideal self, who it is we want to be, who we're striving to be. And unfortunately, for most of us, when we call to mind our actual self and our ideal self, the other thing that becomes obvious is how far apart the two are. And because of that, when we become objectively self-aware, we actually kind of become a little sad. We're a little more sad when we're objectively self-aware than when we're thinking about other things. How do we know this? Chickamauga and Frigursky did a study. This is old, it's probably 20 years old now, but they wanted to have an idea of how often we thought about ourselves. And the idea is that most of the time, most of us are going around thinking about self, 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 self. We're always thinking about ourselves. So what they did is they had people wear beepers. This was before cell phones were common and all of that. They'd wear a beeper. And I think it was 12 times during the day, you'd be randomly beeped at some point. Not like from 11 o'clock at night to 6 in the morning, but during waking hours, you'd get beeped randomly during these 12 times. And it was for a week. And when you were randomly beeped, you were supposed to pull out these cards and you were supposed to rate basically at this moment, how happy are you, how energetic, how discontented, how satisfied. You just answer all these things. And then what are you doing right now? And what are you thinking about right now? And so they looked at this, they compiled the data from all these people, and they tried to get a really representative sample. So they had people from 18 to 63 in all different jobs, all different socioeconomic statuses. It wasn't just done with students. And they wanted to get an idea of how often people think about themselves. And it turns out we don't think of ourselves very often at all. It was like number 8 on the list. And when we are thinking about ourselves, we're less happy and we tend to be less active. And Chickamauga and Frigursky think that that's due to Wicklund's theory of objective self-awareness can explain why maybe we're less happy when we're thinking about ourselves. Okay. One of the things I found interesting is I thought food would be 1 or 2 on the list, and it was way down at like number 13 or something. The number 1 thing that people think about is work, your work or school. And the number 2 thing that people think about are having no thoughts at all. They're like, oh, I wasn't really thinking about anything in particular. My mind was just wandering. So kind of an interesting study. Okay, I've got another video that's going to talk about the BEM sex role inventory. That's a different BEM than the BEM who came up with self-perception theory. But that will be its own video, and these 2 videos make up the lectures for the self. Okay, that's all.